Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Futurum Tech webcast. As part of our interview series today, I am thrilled to be talking with Tim Yates, the CEO of DataXstream. And even better, we're taking this conversation to LinkedIn Live. So we are excited to have you with us and really looking forward to this conversation. I know that all of us at Futurum have been talking a lot about supply chain, and with good reason. A global pandemic has shown us in no uncertain terms how important supply chain is. Everything from, toilet paper shortages in the grocery stores and all other things that we kind of never thought about before. But the supply chain is actually more precarious than most of us think about. And this pandemic has shown us that. And that's especially true as it relates to some 415,000 wholesale distributors out there who have a combined annual sales of some 7.8 trillion. No small audience base there, no small customer base. And those are the people that you work with, Tim, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, it's great to have you here. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about your career path, what you've done during the course of your career.
Sure. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and I started off in manufacturing, working with companies like Siemens Automotive and Mercury Marine. Turns out that at the time I was one of the only people not afraid of computers, and so I found myself being routed in the direction of things like robotics and systems and ERP to support manufacturing operations. And that kind of gave me the nudge into the SAP world, where I've spent my last 20 to 25 years focused in on SAP customers and SAP technologies. So, and when I'm not working, I like to spend my time as a ski race coach with my kids on the snow.
And you've got not only snow, but cold weather right now in Virginia where you're located. So you're a happy guy.
It's been a good season so far. So yes, very happy.
We like that. So talk a little bit about your company, DataXstream, and what you and your team are focused on these days.
Yeah, so DataXstream's origins really were around SAP technology and integrating other solutions into SAP. And as we grew as an organization, we moved more into the core ERP solution space and delivery of all things ERP, both from a technical perspective all the way through functional. As part of that journey, we really started to see particular areas or niches where we were doing kind of the same customizations over and over again for customers. And we felt like we could do those customizations in a product. And we started pivoting 10 years ago in the direction of, not only doing services, but building complementary solutions. And in the last 5 years, really, the team has focused down on building those solutions. And OMS Plus, our flagship product, is really our primary focus these days.
That's awesome. I always love sort of hearing about the progression of, I have kids who are 15-year-old freshmen in high school, daughters, and I'm constantly talking with them about how, sometimes the path you think you're going to go down, like being a mechanical engineer, can lead you into something entirely different. I personally was focused on a pre-law program in...
Absolutely. I mean, at one point I had looked at starting a robotics company because I really enjoyed that part of my engineering background. But it was like a tractor beam. There was so much need for figuring out how to, it was right around the Y2K change too, that I was moving from engineering into IT. There was so much need there in that space. And I kind of recognized the importance of just how much data would transform how manufacturing and businesses worked. And so I just started radiating in that direction. All of a sudden, all those mechanical engineering skills had to get shifted into programming and, a whole bunch of different skill sets.
Well, I think that to me is probably a big lesson here, at least one that I try to preach to my kids and other young people. It's that, being adaptable, being open to change. Part of my career success has been predicated on the fact that I realized early on the role the internet was going to play in business. Right. And, pivoting from an analog business model to a digital business model long before people were really kind of thinking about it. And so much like you, I like change. I pay attention to what's ahead, what's happening, and that sort of thing. So I've always thought it was, kind of I've loved every part of my career path, and it sounds like you have as well.
Oh, it's been great.
So let's talk a little bit about, before we talk any more about OMS Plus and technology solutions, I want to talk a minute about the common challenges that wholesale distributors face. And I know there are many. One of the ones that I'm most familiar with is the ordering process. And we don't think about that, I think as consumers, but, when you're talking about wholesalers that have multiple supply locations and you have different agreements with different customers and different pricing related to those customers, and tracking those agreements across the board, and you have very large orders that sometimes span across many lines. I think that complex is kind of a little bit of an understatement when it talks about the ordering process of wholesale distributor. I know you would agree on that. What are some of the other challenges?
Yes, so it's interesting that is a core challenge and has always been a challenge for wholesalers.
Yeah.
And a secondary one is really inventory management and inventory visibility.
Yeah.
So while that's been a challenge in the past, COVID has really, I think, highlighted it and put a spotlight on it for wholesalers. And the reason being is everybody's kind of been used to a normal. Everybody's gotten used to Amazon and being able to go online, order something, and have it show up the next day. And then all of a sudden, as you mentioned in the opening, like you couldn't get toilet paper in the stores or on Amazon, where you're supposed to be able to get everything, the next day. And wholesalers are seeing this same exact issue across their supply chains because COVID has disrupted the supply chain and has created kinks in the system as it works. So it's highlighted the need to be able to have an adaptable system where if you've been sourcing from one place for a long time and you can't get it from that source anymore, how do you fulfill the customer's demand and pivot to a new place? So really, I think inventory visibility and being able to see what you have as well as see what's inbound and how you can adapt what's coming inbound is a really key point for wholesalers today surviving in this market.
Right. Another challenge I think that we encounter all the time is the learning curve that's associated with ERP solutions, and the fact that a lot of times solutions aren't really developed with frontline workers in mind, with frontline salespeople in mind. And I know my husband's been in sales for a million years, and I get to hear his complaints on a regular basis as a leader of a sales team. And somebody at corporate decides to, buy a new piece of technology, but they haven't really thought through, how it's used or how to train people. And, and then what happens is that people don't use it because it's frustrating. They don't know how to do it. So I know that learning curve is an issue. Definitely that, you have any thoughts on that and what you've encountered along the way?
Yeah, well, as you described, order processing for wholesalers is not your traditional go to the grocery store, ring some things up, and walk out the door. Right. They're generally complex order requirements, very large orders with different delivery schedules, often a mix of stock and non-stock items, sometimes even items that you've never sold before to make a full order for a particular customer. So you're going out and engaging new vendors or engaging new products. And if you think about all the things that would go into that type of order, it brings a high level of complexity. And one of the challenges with all ERPs in the market is that while they have the ability to do all these things, they're typically disconnected in 10 to 20 different steps. And so the key to really making wholesale ordering easier is around two primary things: automating the steps and the pieces that can be automated in between them, and aggregating all the data. So instead of having a user move through 10, 20 different places to actually accomplish the work stream, they go to one place and it's aggregated there and it's automated to simplify their work.
And it doesn't take hours and hours and hours to learn.
Absolutely. That's absolutely one of the advantages of the aggregation is you take your training times from in terms of weeks and months down to hours and days. And that's a huge benefit to organizations because if you think about an employee taking a month plus to become productive, that's a lot of cost and expense. And you're also tying up typically another employee who knows what they're doing, training the employee that's coming up to speed. So if you can do that in hours or days, obviously there's a huge benefit there for customers.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, the COVID-19 pandemic. How have you seen your customers being impacted over the course of the last year?
Well, it's interesting. For prospective customers, they all hit the pause button and said, let's just see where this is going. And what we've seen as the pandemic has moved along, they've all started to now get used to the new norm, and everything is opened back up, especially with the vaccine coming online. And hopefully we're seeing the end of this, or the beginning of the end of this. With our existing customers, it was really interesting. They had a certain way of looking at their businesses, and with the pandemic hitting, they had to pivot many things. So we saw a lot of pivoting within our solution to change selling patterns at the counter. So disconnecting a salesperson from being at a counter to being able to take product that was received via phone call and actually walk it to the car and finish the transaction by just hand delivering the items to the customer themselves. Try to limit that interaction. We've seen a shift in more ordering via phone. So instead of the customer coming into the counter, they place the order via phone. So now we have to change kind of the tools and how we approach the transaction because we're not interacting with the customer face to face.
Right.
So it's really a shift or a blend of kind of the counter, call center, and mobile all working together. And because OMS Plus supports those, all three of those use case scenarios from the same interface, it was easy for our customers to just kind of, well, how do we want to reimagine selling and go and do it? And so that's the primary thing we saw. The other thing we did see is that the customers that had the solution continued to invest in improving during this time. So they've put a lot of energy into improving processes or even taking on new challenges within their organization and pulling them into the solution to streamline things. So I've seen a lot of investment from those customers that are running the solution in the past 12 months.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, many times we are adverse to change.
Yes.
And a lot of times the best laid plans, we're going to do this, and this, and, this budget is allocated here. And I think that what we've seen across the board is, rapid shifts, rapid pivots, rapidly, finding budget, to do things that are critically important to business continuity, business resilience, customer experience, serving your employees, serving your customers. And so as many negatives as a global pandemic has brought, I think it has also showed us very clearly what we're capable of and what's really important for business. And it is a lot about, continuing to serve customers, keep them safe, keep employees safe. And,
Right.
some of it is just kind of a no-brainer, like we could have always done these things. It just didn't occur to us because we didn't have to. And we were used to operating in a physical environment. And then when we had to shift, we had to learn to do things differently. So I think it's fascinating to kind of watch that play out and to see what we're learning, almost a year in, right?
Yes, COVID absolutely put a microscope on weaknesses for organizations, right? Or a magnifying glass. It showed them where they needed to put attention into either the tools or the processes they have. And so, it has accelerated transformation in companies at a pace that, we haven't seen before.
And a lover of change and transformation, think that's a good thing in most instances. So let's talk about, what roadblocks are you seeing in terms of, talking with your customers about their transformation efforts?
Well, there's kind of two. One is, running a small organization that's growing fast. For me as a CEO, I see the need to continuously transform our systems because we're growing and the system we had doesn't meet the needs of the future. I think for more established organizations with the less rapid growth, steady growth kind of organizations, it's a little harder to see the need to keep transforming. You get complacent. I think you mentioned, people don't like to change.
Right.
And that happens with leadership teams. They get complacent with the technology stack they're running on. It doesn't fail them. No need in, changing something that's not fixed. If it's not broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. And I think that leads to not having a solid 3 to 5 year plan for what am I doing with the technology foundation that my organization sits on, and am I continuously moving it forward? Because I think often people look at it as a destination, and it isn't. It's a journey. You're always on this journey because the technology is always advancing. It's always moving. And so that plan is important. So I think that's the first thing that I see that trips organizations up, is not having a 3-5 year outlook and being committed to, that constant looking at renewing processes and so on. So I think that's a big challenge. The other one is just the level of customization that organizations have done to their existing systems. It's unfortunate, but many customers think all their processes are super unique. And what's really interesting is they aren't all that unique to one another. Selling from one customer to the other within a particular industry is 80-90% common. Right. And even across industries, it's 70-80% common. And often companies get into have in the past gone in and customized their system a lot. And what that's led to in this transformation phase, or where they're trying to now get back on the path and get on a journey towards newer technology, is those customizations tend to anchor them. Right. So there's a lot of things customers can do or organizations can do to, I call it pre-gaming. So maybe not make a big digital transformation move, today, but what are the things I need to do to prepare myself to make a big step? And I think there's many pre-gaming things organizations need to do on their plan to get on that path to moving their organization to a better place.
Yeah, I think that's a whole separate discussion.
Yes.
That would be an interesting one. Well, I wear a number of hats within our family of companies. I've been a brand strategist for 20 some years. So I'm used to, looking at things from a strategic standpoint and thinking about, even when it comes to a strategic plan, you can make a 1 year plan and a 3 year plan and a 5 year plan, but especially those 3 and 5 year plans, I mean, there's no way that any of that is actually not going to change. And I think that to me, business success today is all about being agile and being adaptable and letting your data guide you, and, making smart technology decisions, making smart people and culture decisions, because technology isn't the key to successful digital transformation. It's really people and technology, and then watching and tweaking and constantly going on this journey and seeing, what are our results? What does our data say? What are we seeing happening? What are the problems? What are the, challenges, the roadblocks, and I think that and again, I find myself continually grateful. I think that we are wired how we're wired. And when you're not wired for change, it's much more difficult to embrace the business world that we live in today, because change is a given. And when you are wired for change, it's kind of just like, awesome.
Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you change, right? Yeah.
Right.
That is absolutely the case with people. I agree.
So now I want to talk a little bit about DataXstream's OMS Plus. I think it's a game changer for wholesale distributors. And why don't you walk us through a little bit about OMS Plus and what it is you're able to deliver as a result of this solution?
Sure. So OMS Plus is a sales overlay for SAP ERP, and that includes both the S4 product and the ECC product. And I think the best way to describe it is it allows SAP customers to enable their sales teams to have much better sales outcomes for their customers by streamlining the process, giving them end-to-end visibility into the entire sales process, insight into the customer, and understanding their buying patterns, understanding their specific needs quickly, and then finally, it really lets an organization adapt. And in the COVID environment, adaptation in sales processing is absolutely key. Yeah. It was a huge benefit to those customers running OMS Plus, the ability that they could turn their sales process on a dime and change it to the new norm. So I think agility is a very important thing. And, COVID's a disruptor today. Many have talked about Amazon being a disruptor in the marketplace in terms of how things are selling, and that was pre-COVID. And I'm positive there's other things that are going to disrupt. I see AI and machine learning playing a huge part in disrupting how we sell in the future as well. So I think, organizations need to be prepared for those kind of changes, and OMS Plus certainly is designed to allow you to rapidly change your approach to your customers.
Yeah, I think that's really the most exciting thing about it for me. And I completely agree. Rapid change, and today it's a global pandemic. It's going to be something tomorrow. And Amazon's been out there for a long time. That's not going away anytime soon, ever. But that's really the key, I think, to success when it comes to business building, digital transformation, is understanding that disruption is always only a heartbeat away. Right. And really looking at all your operations and all your technology stack and all of your processes, and figuring out how you can, build a resilient business and build one that is constantly evolving and that is agile and adaptable. I feel like I'm beating the agile and adaptable drums, but it really is. I mean, that's really the key to success, I think.
Well, in my sales pitch, agile is kind of my main point that I hit on, because I believe that an organization that has agility in their sales process has the ability to adapt when the customer demand, or when the market moves, or when there's a disruptor, and that's a strategic advantage for an organization to have that agility.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me a little bit, do you have any customer use cases that you can share with us of people who are using OMS Plus?
Yes, certainly. I mean, the range of use cases is pretty broad. We have specialty retailers using it, and kind of my definition of a specialty retailer is an organization that will sell over a period of time. So it isn't a bag and carry and you leave and you're done. It's a transaction that lives for weeks or months as the customer picks up product, installs it, makes adaptations to their order. So the order is always changing. The amount of money you're collecting is always changing. So that's one use case, and it's very OMS Plus is very successful in that sort of application. On the other end, we have complex wholesale distributors selling into large complex projects, orders and quotes that are hundreds to thousands of lines. In fact, we have one that we were prepping to be able to handle quotes that are up to 10,000 lines of materials. And if you think about it, there's all kinds of challenges in those in developing any kind of quote that's got 10,000 items on it, or even 1,000 items. And the use cases we're seeing are, how do you rapidly identify customer materials? What's the best way to pick out those 10,000 things out of your system and put them on an order? Then how do you price them? How do you set margin? How do you make sure we go back to inventory management we were talking about earlier. How do you procure all those things and ensure that they come in on time? Because, as you know, if you're doing a project and you get 90% of the things you need for the project, you still can't do that project. Generally you need all of the things to accomplish that. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. Your more complex retail transaction all the way through to complex quoting. And then there's a lot that sits in between, whether it be, traditional pickup at the counter type orders for a wholesaler or calls into a call center. Those are all traditional things that we see our customers doing. And wholesale industry is very broad. We have customers selling home building products. We have customers selling food products, and even customers selling, complex materials with it. So very, very broad capabilities. And a lot of that comes from the underlying ERP capabilities, right? SAP is very, very capable of running almost any sales process. The trick to it is how do you make it so that it's consumable, repeatable, and very easy for a customer to buy from you.
Right, absolutely. So, and that's the beauty of OMS Plus.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the beauty of OMS Plus. So, as we get to the end of our conversation, tell me, are there any new features of OMS Plus that you're excited about?
Sure, we have a couple things we're working on. We're continuing to expand our quoting functionality, which gives us the ability to go out and actually solicit vendor bids. And that's some really cool technology that the team is currently putting the finishing touches on. The thing I'm most excited about is the work we're doing with machine learning and artificial intelligence. Kind of like S4 when it came out many, many years ago. I wasn't quite sure how it fit and where it worked. And the more I learned about S4 and HANA, the more I became engaged with just how powerful and transformative it would be for organizations. And artificial intelligence is sort of another one of those things where it took me a little while to figure it out and understand it. And it took some smart people showing me, educating me a lot. But what we're doing with it is, leads into those very large orders where a customer provides you with a list of things they need to purchase. How do you get to the answer very quickly? And we've found and have had huge success with a customer that we're working with right now, where we're able to very quickly take customer requirements and translate them into orders using machine learning and data science. And we're looking at improvements of 75% faster to create those orders because of identification being that much faster. I see 1 million applications for it. Customer search is always one of those areas, especially if you're in an organization where you create customers on the fly. A big challenge is not duplicating customers because you had the customer in your system, you just couldn't find them. Artificial intelligence plays a role there. And another big one that we see quite often with wholesalers is, they often are large organizations spread out across the country. They may receive, bidding requests from different organizations that are actually part of the same bid overall. And effectively, they're competing against themselves. So one of the things we're looking to do with AI and machine learning is use it to identify where a company has two teams competing against themselves in a bidding process and highlight to both sides. Hey, by the way, you guys look like you're bidding on the same project. You might want to compare your notes on this. So, and there's dozens of other use cases that I can't wait to dive into. So that's probably the funnest thing and most exciting thing we're working on right now. And we're putting a lot of energy into that.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. The possibilities that AI and machine learning are showing us, and how, that those technologies can work alongside humans and just make everything so much quicker, everything so much easier, fewer mistakes. These technologies have the ability to process information so much more, huge amounts of information so much more quickly than humans ever could. So I'm like you, I'm so excited about the possibilities, and there's so many of them. So it's very cool.
And it's really the perception that machine learning and artificial intelligence has been given by like the movie industry, right? Like you got your Terminator robot that's going to take over the world, but it's really not that, and it's very different. And when you boil it down to like its practical use cases, it has it solves really challenging problems in a very unique way. That if you tried to use traditional technologies to do it, it's nearly impossible. So I'm super excited about what it will do with order management and order processing for companies in the future. And so I'm very excited. Our organization is, got a big focus in this area right now.
Well, I can't wait to learn more about that as you roll that out. That's really exciting. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining me today on this LinkedIn Live and as part of our Futurum Tech webcast. It's been great hearing about what you and the team at DataXstream are doing and learning a little bit more about OMS Plus. And I look forward to hearing more great things from you and your organization in the future.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun talking to you today.
Absolutely. All right. And with that, thanks everybody for hanging out with us, and we'll see you again.